Next is Miss Paula Coelho, who will be sharing results with us of her field and laboratory investigation. Ms. Coelho is an environmental engineer and a PhD graduate research assistant at Purdue University. Ms. Coelho has responded to numerous disasters and emergencies. After the East Palestine incident, she was on a team that responded to the 2023 Maui wildfires. We're interested in understanding what chemicals are present, where did they go, and what type of health risks that they pose to people. Her current research focuses on emerging contaminants in water supplies. And Ms. Coelho, the floor is yours.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you for being here. Today, I would like to present part of our research focused on environmental and property contamination associated with disaster. This research was conducted at Purdue University in collaboration with University of Notre Dame. And if you have any question, you can freely access this study in the journal Environmental Science, Water Research Technology through the link or the QR code displayed on the screen. The primary goal of this research was to better understand the chemicals present in the human exposure pathways. And to do so, we did a 6-field investigations from February to June 2023. And we did a number of things, which I'm not going to be able to cover everything in this short presentation, but you can find the full details in our published study. But I'm going to share with you some of the atmospheric modeling that we did to try to figure out where did the chemicals went. I'm also going to share the outdoors and indoor chemical contamination from buildings and the household and business experiences. The next slide here shows all the samples we collected, where we took them, what we were looking for, and the types of instrumentations we used. Sharing this for those of you familiar with environmental water sampling and analysis, since it will help you contextualize the technology and techniques we used, and all the details of the methods and the techniques are described in the published paper and in the supporting information. And we collected we collected samples from creeks, like surface water and sediments. We collected drinking water from private wells. Silicon items from contaminated business and sorbent pads. Now, I will present the results of our study. And here in this figure, you see the air quality modeling results from our team member, Dr. Gauri Prabhakar, who used the NOAA high-split modeling program. And as we already expected, the highest concentration you see here of contamination was near the derailment site. And as you move away from it, the probability of contamination moving to that area decreased. As you can see here, there are different colors in this figure. And the further you get from the derailment site, the less likely that contamination got there. Other studies have shown that contamination traveled far from the derailment site, and our studies support these findings. One of these studies has the link on this very same slide here that you can also have access to it. And in addition to the air quality modeling, we wiped building exteriors to test for contamination. And we didn't initially expect to find anything, but we detected chemicals from the rail cars on outside of buildings even 5 weeks after the incident. We also went to business, to a business who provided us some of the products, and we discovered that their products, the silicone wristbands, had been contaminated with railcar chemicals. Chemicals such as 2-butoxyethanol that was present on the rail car, had about 25,000 gallons that was spilled in this accident, and other chemicals such as butyl acrylate and 2-hexyl acrylate were also present on the rail cars. These chemicals that were on the rail cars were found not only on the outside of some of these buildings and silicone wristbands, but they were also detected in the indoor of the buildings, which brings us to this next slide here. So in the building with the silicone wristbands, this company went in and did air testing. And the instrument that they were using, they didn't detect any contaminants associated with the disaster, but the comments of the worker, it's very interesting here, because it says that he wasn't able to stand more than 10 minutes inside of this building because of the unpleasant and overwhelming odor. And we jump to the next slide, which I show here our initial interest in this disaster, because when we first got involved with this disaster, our primary interest was to understand surface water contamination. But after we got there, we observed so many things, different things happening, which motivated us to collect other kind of samples, to put all the pieces of this puzzle together and understand the chemical exposure and health risk that the community would getting exposed to because of this disaster. So, but the water result shows that the closer you are to the spill site, the highest concentration you have in the creek, in the surface water. And our findings is very similar to findings from the responders and other researchers that other studies that were published before. And in the figure here, you see pictures that we took during the field investigations of sheen floating on the creek. And this sheen is like flocks of contamination that was floating in the creek. And you can see that it was very, showing that the contamination was very heterogeneous. So, which brings us to understand what was the concentration in different sections of the creek for the contamination was so different. So we analyzed all the things that were happening. So the cleanup process by the responders. So they installed dams in different sections of the creek by booms and sorbent pads. And we collected one of these sorbent pads that was being used on the creek to remove that contamination. And we found out that some chemicals were removed by the sorbent pads and some others would not. And therefore, the emissions of the chemicals downstream was relatively different. And also another cleanup process used by the responders was the aeration of the creek, which is responsible for removing the contamination from the water and blowing into the air. And we were interested in the degree of the contamination that was being blown into the air. And so VOCs like butyl acrylate, they prefer to be in air other than water. So we contaminated water on the laboratory here at Purdue. That contamination was being blown into the air in East Palestine. So in summary, our investigation identified a number of exposure pathways that had not been previously considered. And this image here you see right now illustrate how the chemicals from the derailment site traveled into the community, reaching workers and the public. These chemicals were released at the derailment site, either from the train cars themselves or byproducts of the fire on the environment, on the water environment, and the air. And as the figure shows, the chemical did not remain confined to the creeks or evaporated at the derailment site alone. So the takeaway of this figure is that this disaster caused a very complex series of exposures, and additional information in details about this figure and all the other parts of this study that I wasn't able to share in this presentation, you can find in our paper. So based on our findings, we provide several recommendations, including actions to take before and in response to such incident, as well as specific recommendations relevant to this disaster. It does not seem that there is an established protocol for verifying buildings' exterior for contamination, checking that the indoor air is safe, or assessing if the surface are not harmful. So all these protocols needs to be developed. We also suggested developing a model to predict chemical emissions from creeks before and during aeration processes. But for this incident itself, we recommend characterizing or removing contamination in the affected area, providing long-term medical support to workers and bystanders exposed. As shown in our study and other workers' safety reports that indicated prolonged exposure over months. With that, thank you so much for the opportunity to share this with all of you. And I will pass it back to you, Dr. Alton.